You useless old fool. Why won't you just hurry up and die already so I can cash in?
She hissed at my dying son, her voice dripping with venom I'd never imagined possible. I watched that video 3 times before my hands stopped shaking. My daughter-in-law, Emily, the woman I'd welcomed into my home, the woman I'd trusted with my grandchildren, the woman who called me Mom with those warm brown eyes, stood over Daniel's hospital bed, laughing. Actually laughing, while he slept, poisoned by medications she'd been switching out for months. But here's what Emily didn't know. This old woman had been taking notes, recording dates, saving receipts, and I wasn't just going to expose her. Oh no, sweetheart. I was going to make sure the whole town watched her perfect mask shatter into 1,000 irreparable pieces, right there in the Lord's house, with lightning as my witness and gospel hymns as her funeral march. Let me tell you how we got here. They say retirement is supposed to be golden, don't they? Tom and I thought we'd earned it. 72 and 75 years of hard living, raising good kids, paying our dues. We'd moved to Gray Harbor, North Carolina, where the Atlantic whispers against old wooden docks and the air smells like salt and pine needles mixed together. Our little house sat 3 blocks from the shore, painted butter yellow with white shutters that Tom insisted on repainting every spring. Sunday mornings were my favorite. I'd wake to the sound of gulls crying over the harbor, their voices sharp and clean like church bells. Tom would already be up, brewing coffee so strong it could wake the dead, humming old hymns off-key in that deep voice I'd loved for 50 years. We'd walk to Pine Rose Community Church hand in hand, my arthritis barely noticeable when his warm palm pressed against mine. Daniel would drive down from Charlotte most weekends, his wife Emily beside him, their smiles bright as summer. Emily always brought something. Homemade pie, flowers from her preschool's garden, cheerful stories about the children she taught. She'd kiss my cheek and say, "Mom, you look more beautiful every time I see you." And I'd feel that warm glow only a mother-in-law who's been accepted can feel. I remember one particular Sunday. It must have been late April because the azaleas were blooming pink and violent against our fence. Daniel stood in our living room, struggling with his necktie like always, his fingers clumsy and frustrated. I walked over, my reading glasses still perched on my nose from the morning crossword. "Here, baby, let me," I said softly, reaching up to fix his collar. He bent down, 45 years old but still my little boy, letting me tie that blue silk tie his father had given him for his birthday. His hair smelled like the same coconut shampoo he'd used since high school. Emily watched from the doorway, her smile serene and loving, and I actually thought, God has blessed this family beyond measure. The church choir sang How Great Thou Art that morning, their voices rising up toward the rafters like prayers made visible. Emily held the hymnal for Daniel, their heads tilted together, and I thanked Jesus for giving my son such a devoted wife. Tom squeezed my hand during the sermon, his eyes crinkling at the corners the way they did when he was content. After service, we'd gather at our kitchen table, Tom carving the roast, me passing around green beans and cornbread, Emily laughing at Daniel's terrible jokes, her hand resting on his arm with what looked like tenderness. The afternoon light would slant golden through the lace curtains my mother had made, and I'd think, this is what I worked for. This peace, this love. I was so blind, so pathetically, foolishly blind. But even then, small things whispered warnings I refused to hear. The way Emily's smile never quite reached her eyes when she thought no one was looking. How she'd check her phone constantly, her thumbs flying over the screen with urgent secrecy. The designer purse she carried, too expensive for a preschool teacher's salary, even with Daniel's bank manager income. I told myself I was being paranoid, ungrateful. What kind of mother suspects the woman who brings her son happiness? The kind who should have listened to her gut, because 3 months later, everything shattered. And by the time I understood what Emily really was, what she'd been doing in the shadows while wearing that sweet mask, it was almost too late to save my son's life. Almost. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning in July, while I was deadheading roses in the front garden. I remember because my hands were covered in soil, rich and dark, when Tom brought the cordless phone out to me. His face had gone pale, the color of old newspaper. He didn't say anything, just held it out with a trembling hand that told me everything had changed. "Mom?" Daniel's voice sounded thin, stretched tight like piano wire about to snap. My heart dropped straight through my chest into my stomach. "Baby, what's wrong?" He tried to speak, but the words tangled up in his throat. I heard him swallow hard, fighting for composure the way men do when they're terrified. Finally, Emily's voice came through instead, gentle and worried, exactly what a devoted wife should sound like. "Mom, it's his liver," she said quietly, her tone heavy with manufactured sorrow. "Advanced cirrhosis. The doctors say he needs constant care now, and the medical bills." She paused, letting out a shaky breath that sounded so convincing. "We're drowning, Mom." I don't know what to do. The roses dropped from my hand. Thorns caught my wrist, but I didn't feel them. All I felt was that ancient mother terror, the one that lives in your bones from the moment you first hold your baby and realize how fragile life really is. "How much do you need?" I asked immediately, my voice steady even though my legs had started shaking. "30,000 for now," Emily whispered, humble and apologetic. "I hate to ask, I really do, but the insurance won't cover everything and—" "I'll wire it today," I interrupted, already walking toward the house. Tom followed me inside, his work boots heavy on the wooden porch. The screen door slammed behind us, that familiar crack like a gunshot. Inside, our kitchen still smelled like the cinnamon rolls I'd baked that morning, sweet and safe, the scent of a life that was already slipping away. I sat at the computer desk in the corner, my fingers clumsy on the keyboard while Tom stood behind me, his hand resting on my shoulder. We transferred the money without hesitation. $30,000 from our retirement savings, money we'd been putting away for 50 years. Every dollar earned by Tom running into burning buildings, by me teaching second graders their multiplication tables. It felt like nothing compared to Daniel's life. "God will see us through this," Emily said when I called to confirm the transfer, her voice breaking beautifully. "Your faith and generosity, I don't know what we'd do without you." I believed her. Of course I believed her. She was my son's wife, the mother of my grandchildren, a woman who taught preschoolers about kindness and sharing. Why wouldn't I believe her? That Sunday at church, I prayed harder than I'd prayed in years. My knees ached against the wooden kneeler, but I stayed down, hands clasped so tight my knuckles went white. Pastor Mike was preaching about Job's trials, about faith tested by fire, and every word felt aimed straight at my heart. "Lord, give me strength to carry this burden," I whispered, my lips barely moving. "Protect my son. Heal his body. Guide Emily's hands as she cares for him." Tom squeezed into the pew beside me, his shoulder warm and solid against mine. He didn't pray out loud, never did, but I felt his faith humming like electricity through his body. We'd weather this storm together, the way we'd weathered everything else, but small cracks were already forming, thin as spider silk. 2 weeks later, Emily called asking for another $15,000. "Emergency procedure," she explained, her voice tight with stress. "Something about a specialist in Durham." I wired the money that same afternoon, my hand hovering over the mouse for only a second before clicking confirm. Then in August, another $12,000. September, $8,000 more. Each time, Emily's explanations came wrapped in medical jargon and tearful gratitude. Each time, I told myself that doubt was a sin, that questioning her was the same as abandoning Daniel in his darkest hour. But those receipts she'd email, something about them felt wrong. The dates seemed jumbled. The hospital names kept changing. And when I'd ask specific questions about doctors or treatments, Emily's answers would slide sideways, slippery as wet stones. "You wouldn't understand the medical terminology, Mom," she'd say sweetly, dismissing my concerns with a little laugh. "Just trust that we're doing everything possible." Trust. That word she used like a weapon, cutting me every time I tried to look closer. October brought the first real fracture. I drove up to Charlotte unannounced, bringing Daniel's favorite apple pie and a care package of warm socks and crossword puzzles. Emily had said he was too weak for visitors, but a mother's instinct overrides politeness sometimes. The apartment door was locked. I knocked 3 times, my knuckles rapping against cheap wood, before Emily finally opened it. She stood in the doorway wearing a coral silk blouse I'd never seen before, blocking my view inside with her body. "Mom!" Her surprise sounded too sharp, almost alarmed. "You should have called first." "I wanted to surprise him," I said, trying to peer past her shoulder. "Is he sleeping?" "Yes, and the doctor said rest is crucial right now." Emily's smile stayed perfect, but her eyes had gone cold, flat as stones at the bottom of a creek. "Maybe next weekend would be better." Behind her, I caught a glimpse of their dining room table. Takeout containers, 2 wine glasses, candles burning low. The apartment smelled like expensive perfume and something else. Cologne, masculine and unfamiliar. "Who's here?" I asked slowly, my grandmother's pie dish suddenly heavy in my hands. Emily's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. "Oh, just Victor, my landlord. He stopped by to fix the sink. At 8 o'clock at night, with wine and candles. I didn't push it, didn't demand to see Daniel. I just smiled, handed over the pie, and walked back to my car with my spine straight and my thoughts screaming." That night, lying next to Tom in our bed, I listened to the ocean breathing outside our window. Waves rolling in, pulling back, endless and patient. My husband snored softly beside me, but sleep wouldn't come. Something was profoundly, terribly wrong, and for the first time in my life, I wondered if evil could wear the face of family. I stopped asking permission after that night. The following week, I packed Tom's old thermos with chicken soup, the kind with thick egg noodles and carrots cut just so, and drove the 2 hours to Charlotte without calling ahead. My hands gripped the steering wheel tight enough to leave marks, and I prayed the entire way that I was wrong, that my suspicions were just the paranoid imaginings of an aging mind. The apartment building looked shabbier in November light, the brick facade stained with years of coastal weather. I climbed 3 flights of stairs, my knees protesting each step, carrying that thermos like it was holy water. This time when I knocked, Emily took longer to answer. 5 minutes at least. When the door finally cracked open, she looked disheveled. Her hair mussed, lipstick smeared slightly at the corner of her mouth. She wore a bathrobe at 2 in the afternoon. "Mom, this really isn't a good time," she said, her voice brittle with barely concealed irritation. "I brought soup for Daniel," I replied firmly, not moving from the doorway. "I'd like to see my son." Something flickered across her face. Annoyance, maybe fear, but she stepped aside with exaggerated patience. The apartment hit me like a physical blow. Dirty dishes piled in the sink, crusty with days-old food, mail scattered across every surface, most of it unopened. The air smelled stale, like old sweat and something sour I couldn't identify. And there was Daniel. My boy sat slumped on the couch in stained sweatpants and a t-shirt that hung off his frame like a shroud. He'd lost at least 30 pounds. His skin had that yellowish tint I recognized from Tom's uncle before he passed. Jaundice, they call it, when your liver stops doing its job. Dark circles pooled under his eyes like bruises. "Daniel," I whispered, my voice cracking despite my best efforts. He looked up slowly, as if his neck could barely support his head. When he saw me, confusion clouded his face for a moment before recognition sparked. "Mom? What are you doing here?" I crossed the room and knelt beside him, ignoring the way my knees screamed in protest. Up close, he smelled unwashed. His breath was sharp, chemical. "Baby, have you eaten today?" He blinked at me, struggling to focus. "I think Emily made breakfast." I glanced toward the kitchen. The stove was cold, spotless, not a pan in sight. On the coffee table sat 3 empty ramen containers, the kind that cost 50 cents at the corner store. My son, my successful bank manager son who'd always taken pride in his appearance, was surviving on instant noodles while his wife wore designer clothes and entertained men with wine. "Let me heat up this soup," I said gently, standing with effort. Emily materialized beside me, her hand shooting out to grab my wrist. Her fingers dug in hard enough to bruise. "He can't have that," she snapped, her sweet mask finally slipping. "The doctor has him on a very specific diet." "Chicken soup violates what diet exactly?" I asked, meeting her eyes without flinching. For a moment, something ugly rippled across her face. Pure, undisguised hatred. Then she smoothed it away, forcing her features back into concerned patience. You wouldn't understand the complexities of liver disease, Mom. Please don't interfere with his treatment. I opened their refrigerator anyway. Inside, expired milk, moldy cheese, 3 bottles of expensive white wine, and a takeout container of shrimp scampi, the kind Daniel was deathly allergic to. Had been since childhood. My hands started shaking again, not from age this time, from rage so pure it felt like electricity in my veins. Emily, I said quietly, carefully, the way you'd speak to a dangerous animal. Why is there shellfish in this refrigerator when Daniel can't eat it? She laughed, light and dismissive, like I'd asked why the sky was blue. That's mine, obviously. I still need to eat, don't I? Taking care of him is exhausting, taking care of him. While he wasted away on sodium-packed garbage and she dined on $20 pasta. While she wore silk and he sat in filth. I heated the soup despite her protests, watching Daniel's hands shake as he lifted the spoon to his lips. He ate 3 mouthfuls before Emily announced he needed rest, practically shoving me toward the door, with false concern dripping from every word. Thanks so much for visiting, Mom. You're such a blessing, but really he needs his medication and sleep now. I paused at the threshold, looking back at my son's hollow face. Daniel, honey, are you taking all your prescriptions like you're supposed to? Emily handles all that, he mumbled, his words slurring slightly. She's real good about it. Emily's smile was brilliant, triumphant. Someone has to keep him organized. You know how men are. I drove home in silence, my mind churning. Tom was waiting on the porch when I pulled up, the sunset painting everything orange and gold behind him. One look at my face and he knew. What did you find? He asked gravely, his firefighter instincts reading the smoke before the fire. Something's wrong, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Something's very, very wrong. That night, I did something I never thought I'd do. I opened Daniel's bank statements, the ones he'd given me power of attorney access to years ago, back when everything was normal and trust wasn't a weapon. The numbers told a story Emily's sweet words couldn't hide. Transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, cash withdrawals of $500, $800, $1,000 at a time. And there, buried in the transactions, a payment to Holland Property Management for $12,000, dated the same week Emily claimed she'd used my money for Daniel's emergency surgery. Victor Holland, the landlord fixing sinks at 8 p.m. with wine and candles. I printed every page, my hands moving with mechanical precision, while my heart shattered into smaller and smaller pieces. Then I called my daughter Susan, my voice steady despite the tears streaming down my face. Honey, I said when she answered, I need your help with something, and I need you not to ask questions yet. Susan, bless her, heard the steel underneath my words. Whatever you need, Mom. When? Tomorrow, bring your laptop. I paused, staring at the stack of evidence on my kitchen table. And maybe a camera. Because if doubt was a sin, then so was silence in the face of evil, and I was done being silent. Susan arrived the next morning with her laptop bag and something small wrapped in bubble wrap. She's always been my practical child, works in tech up in Raleigh, thinks in systems and solutions instead of emotions. When she hugged me in the doorway, she held on longer than usual. Show me everything, Mom, she said quietly, her voice all business but her eyes soft with concern. We spread the bank statements across the dining room table like evidence at a crime scene. Tom sat with us, his reading glasses perched on his nose, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. Outside, November wind rattled the windows, carrying the smell of salt and coming rain. Susan's fingers flew across her keyboard, pulling up records I didn't know existed. Insurance claims, medical billing statements, transaction histories that painted a picture so ugly I had to look away sometimes just to breathe. Mom, Susan said after an hour, her voice carefully controlled. This payment here, the one to Holland Properties for $12,000, it's dated 3 days before Emily claimed she used your money for Daniel's hospital bill. What does that mean? Tom asked, though we all knew the answer. It means she lied, Susan replied bluntly, her anger simmering just below her professional tone. She took your money for something else entirely, and look at this. She pointed to another line. Life insurance policy increase. Daniel's coverage went from $200,000 to $800,000 6 months ago. The room went cold despite the heater running. $800,000. That's what my son's life was worth to his wife. We need proof, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Real proof, not just numbers on paper. Susan reached into her bag and pulled out the bubble-wrapped package. Inside was something that looked like a phone charger, small and innocent. It's a camera, she explained, her words careful and deliberate. Battery-powered, motion-activated, records everything to a cloud server I can access remotely. Tom and I stared at it like it was a snake. Spying on family, it went against everything we'd been raised to believe. But then I thought of Daniel's yellow skin, his hollow eyes, the way Emily's mask had slipped to show the monster underneath. If no one protects him, I whispered, hearing my own voice like it belonged to someone else, then I will. The next weekend, I told Emily I wanted to stay with them for a few days, help with Daniel's care, give her a break. She resisted at first, her excuses flowing smooth as honey. The apartment was too small. Daniel needed quiet. She had everything under control. Emily, I said firmly, using the tone that had silenced rowdy second graders for 30 years. I'm staying. That's final. She relented with theatrical grace, sighing like I'd asked her to move mountains, but I saw the calculation behind her eyes, already planning how to manage me. I arrived with casseroles and clean sheets, playing the doting grandmother perfectly. Emily watched me like a hawk, but she had to work, or pretended to. Those preschool hours gave Susan and me our window. We installed the camera inside a decorative picture frame on the bookshelf, angled to capture most of the living room and kitchen. My hand shook so badly Susan had to do the actual placement. The whole time I kept thinking, this is wrong, this is a violation, this is necessary. For 3 days, I cooked and cleaned and sat with Daniel while he drifted in and out of confused sleep. His medication bottles lined the counter, 10 different prescriptions, all from different pharmacies. When I tried to organize them, Emily snatched them away with sharp irritation. I said I handle this, Mom. She snapped, her patience finally fraying. Stop interfering. But I'd already photographed every label with my cell phone. Susan would check them later against what Daniel's doctors had actually prescribed. On my last night there, Emily went out. Dinner with colleagues, she announced breezily, wearing a dress that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Victor's giving me a ride since my car's in the shop. Victor, always Victor lurking in the margins of her lies. She left at 7. I waited 30 minutes, then checked the camera feed on Susan's laptop. The red light blinked steadily. Recording, waiting. At 9:15, Emily returned. I heard her heels clicking up the stairs, heard the door open, but she wasn't alone. Male voices, laughter, the sound of wine bottles clinking. I stayed in the guest room with the lights off, my heart hammering against my ribs like it was trying to escape. Through the thin walls, I heard everything. Emily's giggle, high and false, a man's deeper rumble, music playing low, then sounds that made my stomach turn, sounds no mother-in-law should ever hear from her son's home while he lay drugged and helpless 20 feet away. I pressed my palm against my mouth to keep from screaming. The next morning, Emily was sunshine itself at breakfast. Fresh makeup, bright smile, asking if I'd slept well in her kindest voice. Daniel sat at the table pushing scrambled eggs around his plate, oblivious or too medicated to remember the previous night. You're such a blessing, Mom. Emily cooed, squeezing my hand with false warmth. Daniel's so lucky to have you. I smiled back, my face feeling like cracked porcelain. Family takes care of family. I drove home in silence, my hands white-knuckled on the wheel. Tom was waiting on the porch again. He'd taken to standing watch like an old soldier, sensing the battle coming. Did you get it? He asked simply. We got something, I replied, my voice hollow. I don't know if I can watch it. But I did watch it, That evening, Susan came over with her laptop. The three of us sat in our living room, the same room where we'd celebrated birthdays and Christmases, where we'd laughed and prayed and lived our decent lives, and we watched evil unfold in high definition. The footage was worse than I'd imagined. Emily mocking Daniel's weakness, calling him pathetic. Emily with Victor Holland, their bodies tangled on my son's couch while he slept drugged in the next room. Emily on her phone, her voice cold and calculated. Once the new policy goes through, it's just a matter of time. The doctors won't question anything. Then the part that broke me. Emily standing over Daniel's pill organizer, switching medications between slots, replacing what looked like vital prescriptions with sugar pills or worse. Her face was completely calm, almost bored, like she was sorting laundry instead of slowly poisoning her husband. Tom made a sound like a wounded animal. Susan's face had gone sheet white. And me? I felt something fundamental shift inside my chest. Not my heart breaking. That had already shattered. This was something harder, colder. This was the birth of purpose. "We have to call the police," Susan said, her voice shaking. "No." My word cut through the room like a blade. "Not yet." They both stared at me. I stared at the frozen image on the screen. Emily's face, beautiful and monstrous, caught in the act of attempted murder. "If we call the police now, she'll lawyer up. Claim it's a misunderstanding. She's smart and she's connected." I stood slowly, my old bones creaking but my spine steel straight. "We need more. We need everything. Every lie, every theft, every betrayal documented so thoroughly that she can't slip away." "Mom, what are you planning?" Susan asked carefully, something like awe creeping into her voice. I thought about Sunday services, about the whole town gathered together, about truth and light and divine justice. "Something she'll never see coming," I replied softly, a strange calm settling over me like armor. "Something that will make sure she never hurts anyone again. Because evil thrives in darkness." And I was about to drag it screaming into the light of day. The next 2 weeks, I became someone I barely recognized. A detective, a spy, a woman possessed by righteous fury. Susan taught me things a 72-year-old retired teacher had no business knowing. How to access cloud storage, how to cross-reference financial records, how to build a timeline so airtight that lies couldn't squeeze through the cracks. My grandchildren came home for Thanksgiving break. Noah from his computer science program, Ava from art school. When I told them what their mother had done, I watched their faces crumble like sandcastles hit by waves. "Grandma, no," Ava whispered, her voice breaking with the kind of pain that comes from having your foundation ripped away. "Mom wouldn't, she couldn't." I showed them the videos, all of them. Every cruel word, every poisoned pill, every moment of betrayal captured in unforgiving pixels. Noah's hands clenched into fists so tight his knuckles went bone white. He's always been quiet, gentle like his father, but watching him see the truth, it was like watching something fundamental crack open inside him. "I'm going to kill her," he said flatly, his voice empty of everything except cold rage. "No," I replied firmly, putting my hand over his shaking fist. "We're going to do something much worse. We're going to expose her." Ava looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes, mascara streaking down her cheeks like war paint. "How?" I told them my plan. As the words left my mouth, I watched understanding bloom across their faces. Noah's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. Ava nodded slowly, her artist's mind already seeing the scene unfold. "That's savage, Grandma," Noah said, and this time there was something like pride in his voice. "Sometimes," I replied quietly, "love requires savagery." We chose the second Sunday in December. Gray Harbor's church always held a special service that day, the whole town packed into those wooden pews, singing carols and celebrating community. Emily never missed it. She loved being seen there, loved the way people admired her devotion and sacrifice. The weather forecast predicted storms. Perfect. That morning, I woke before dawn and knelt beside my bed. The floorboards were cold against my knees through my nightgown. Outside, wind was already picking up, rattling the shutters like restless ghosts. Lord, I prayed, my voice barely a whisper in the darkness, forgive me for what I'm about to do. But you said to bring things into the light. You said the truth would set us free. My hands trembled as I clasped them together. If this is wrong, strike me down, but if it's right, if it's just, then give me strength, because I'm terrified. Tom found me there 20 minutes later, still kneeling, tears streaming down my face. He helped me up without a word, his strong hands gentle, and held me while I shook. You don't have to do this, he murmured into my hair, his voice rough with emotion. We can just call the police right now. She'd wiggle free, I said, pulling back to look at him. You know she would. Rich lawyer daddy, connections, that pretty face. She'd claim we doctored the evidence, that we're bitter old people who never liked her. Tom's jaw worked. He knew I was right. But this, I continued, my voice growing steadier, this she can't escape from. Not when the whole town bears witness. The church bells started ringing at 9:30, their bronze voices carrying over the harbor. The sky had gone dark, bruised purple and gray, pregnant with the coming storm. We dressed in our Sunday best, me in my navy dress with pearl buttons, Tom in the suit he'd worn to our 50th anniversary. Susan arrived with her laptop in a protective case. Noah carried the cables and adapters, his face set with grim determination. Ava had her phone fully charged, ready to live stream everything to every social media platform she could access. Once this starts, Susan warned us all, her voice tight with anxiety, there's no taking it back. Everyone will know, the whole town. Daniel will know. Daniel deserves to know, I said firmly, though my heart was splintering at the thought of my son's pain. And everyone else deserves to know what they've been fooled by. We arrived early. Pastor Mike was in his office, reviewing his sermon notes. I knocked gently, my pulse hammering in my throat. Mary, he greeted me warmly, his round face creased with genuine affection. You're here early. Everything all right? Pastor Mike, I said carefully, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. I need to use the projector before your sermon. Just for a few minutes. It's urgent. It's about justice. Something in my face made him pause. He studied me for a long moment, this man who'd baptized my children and buried my parents, and slowly nodded. I trust you, Mary, he said quietly, his pastoral instincts reading the gravity of the moment. Do what you need to do. By 10 o'clock, the pews were full. The whole congregation packed in, shaking rain from their umbrellas, greeting each other with Sunday warmth. Thunder rumbled in the distance, growing closer. The stained glass windows, depicting Jesus calming the storm, seemed to glow with strange intensity in the darkening light. Emily arrived fashionably late, as always. She wore cream-colored silk and a string of pearls, her hair perfect, her makeup flawless. Daniel shuffled beside her, so thin now his suit jacket hung like a tent. She guided him to their usual spot, 3 rows from the front, her hand solicitous on his elbow, playing the devoted wife, right up until the end. The service began normally. We sang Amazing Grace, our voices rising toward the rafters while lightning flickered outside. The old hymn had never sounded so much like a battle cry. Pastor Mike welcomed everyone, made his usual announcements, asked for prayers for the sick and struggling. Then he paused and looked at me. I nodded once. Before my sermon today, he said, his voice carrying through the church, Mary Grayson has something urgent to share with the congregation. Mary? I stood slowly, my knees protesting but my spine straight. Every eye in that church turned toward me. I could feel their curiosity, their confusion. Emily's face had gone pale, her eyes darting toward the exits like a trapped animal sensing danger. Susan was already connecting her laptop to the projector. The screen descended with a mechanical whir. Noah stood by the light switches. Ava had her phone raised, recording streaming this moment to the world beyond our small town. Thunder cracked directly overhead, so loud it shook the building. Rain began hammering against the roof like judgment itself. I walked to the front of the church and turned to face them all. My neighbors, my friends, the people who'd known me for 20 years, and Emily, sitting frozen in her pew, her perfect mask beginning to crack. "Some of you know my son Daniel is very sick," I began, my voice clear and calm despite the storm raging outside and inside. "What you don't know is why." The first video began to play. Emily's voice filled the sanctuary, crystal clear and venomous. "You useless old fool. Why won't you just hurry up and die already so I can cash in?" Gasps rippled through the congregation like wind through wheat. On screen, Emily stood over Daniel's sleeping form, laughing. Actually laughing. Lightning split the sky outside, illuminating the stained glass in brilliant white. The image of Jesus calming the waters blazed with sudden fire. "Turn it off!" Emily shrieked, jumping to her feet, her composure shattering completely. "This is insane. This is a violation. Turn it off right now." But nobody moved. They all sat transfixed, watching evil reveal itself in House of God. The videos played on, one after another, Emily switching medications, Emily with Victor Holland, Emily discussing insurance payouts on the phone, Emily's face, beautiful and monstrous, committing slow murder with calculated precision. The storm outside reached its crescendo. Rain pounded, thunder roared, and in Pine Rose Community Church, the truth fell like lightning, illuminating every shadow, burning away every lie. I stood in front of them all and spoke the words I'd been holding in my heart like coals. "The truth," I said quietly, my voice somehow carrying through the chaos, "will set you free." Emily ran, stumbled toward the door, her heels catching on the worn carpet, her silk dress clinging to her trembling body. But there was nowhere to go. The police were already outside, waiting. Susan had called them the night before. The church sat in stunned silence as officers led Emily away in handcuffs, her screaming protests fading into the storm. And Daniel, my poor broken Daniel, he sat in that pew with tears streaming down his yellow face, watching his wife disappear, finally understanding the truth that had almost killed him. The silence after Emily's arrest was worse than the storm. Everyone sat frozen in those pews, the projector screen still glowing blank and accusing. Rain hammered the roof in sheets, but inside it was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat, thudding in my ears like funeral drums. Then Martha Henderson stood up from the back row. She's lived in Gray Harbor longer than anyone, runs the library, always speaks her mind whether you want to hear it or not. "Mary Grayson," she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife through butter, sharp with disapproval. "You should be ashamed of yourself." The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually stumbled backward. "Airing your family's dirty laundry in God's house," Martha continued, her face twisted with righteous indignation. "Humiliating your own son in front of the entire town. What kind of mother does that?" Murmurs rippled through the congregation. I watched faces I'd known for 20 years close against me like shutters in a hurricane. Mrs. Chen, who I'd taught to make apple pie. The Hoffmans, whose grandson I'd tutored through 2nd grade. Even young Rebecca Mills, whose baby shower I'd organized just last spring. They were looking at me like I was the monster. "Daniel," Pastor Mike said gently, approaching my son with careful compassion. "Let's get you somewhere quiet." But Daniel just sat there staring at his hands. His whole body had started shaking, small tremors that built into full convulsions. His breathing came in short, panicked gasps. Tom rushed to his side, but Daniel pushed him away with surprising strength. "Don't touch me," Daniel choked out, his voice raw with anguish and humiliation. "Don't any of you touch me." He looked at me then. My baby boy, my firstborn, looked at me with eyes full of such pain and shame that I felt my knees buckle. "You had no right," he whispered, each word dropping like stones into deep water. "That was my life, my marriage, my private hell. You had no right to make it public." "Daniel," I started, reaching for him, "get away from me." He shouted it this time, his voice cracking, heads turned, people gasped. You destroyed everything. Whatever dignity I had left, you just took it and threw it up on that screen for everyone to see. He stumbled out of the pew and toward the door, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. Noah tried to stop him, but Daniel shoved past his own son with desperate strength. The church doors slammed open, wind and rain poured in, and then he was gone, swallowed by the storm. I started after him, but Susan grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in hard. "Mom, let him go." "He needs time, as if time could heal the wound I just carved into my son's soul in front of 200 witnesses. The congregation began filing out in uncomfortable silence, giving me wide berth like I was contagious. Some wouldn't meet my eyes, others stared with open hostility. Joyce Patterson, whose grandson Noah had played with since kindergarten, spat at my feet as she passed. Within 20 minutes, the church was empty except for my family and Pastor Mike, who stood near the altar looking older than I'd ever seen him. The storm still raged outside. Thunder rolled like God's anger. "I thought I was doing the right thing," I said to no one in particular, my voice hollow and strange. "I thought the truth would heal us." "The truth often wounds before it heals, Mary," Pastor Mike replied quietly, his tone neither approving nor condemning. "You chose a hard path. Now you have to walk it." We drove home through the storm in silence. Tom's hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles had gone white. Susan sat in the back, staring out at the rain. Noah kept checking his phone, trying to reach his father. Ava cried silently, her mascara running in black rivers down her face. When we got home, I went straight to Daniel's old bedroom, the one we'd kept for him all these years, still decorated with his high school baseball trophies and faded posters. I sat on his childhood bed and finally let myself break. I cried for 3 hours, great heaving sobs that tore through my chest like razors. Tom tried to comfort me, but I couldn't be comforted. I'd saved my son's life, but destroyed his dignity, protected him, but humiliated him, done the right thing in the worst possible way. The phone started ringing around midnight. Angry calls from the church board, from neighbors, from people I'd considered friends demanding to know what kind of woman would betray her own family like that. "You made us all look foolish," Helen Crandall hissed into the phone, her voice venomous with embarrassment. "We invited that woman into our homes, into our Bible study. You should have handled this privately like decent people do." I hung up on her, then I unplugged the phone entirely. By morning, the storm had passed, but the damage remained. Our front yard was littered with the debris: tree branches, shingles, somebody's patio furniture. The ocean looked gray and exhausted, spent from its night of fury. Daniel wasn't answering his phone. He'd checked himself into a motel on the highway, Susan discovered through some internet searching. Alone, refusing visitors, refusing help. "Mom," Susan said that afternoon, finding me standing at the kitchen window, staring at nothing. "The police called. They need your testimony. They're charging Emily with attempted murder, fraud, and about 15 other things." "Good," I said flatly, feeling nothing at all. "Also," she hesitated, "Daniel's been hospitalized. He collapsed at the motel. His liver is failing faster now. The stress, the doctor said. The emotional trauma. The floor seemed to tilt under my feet. Tom caught me before I fell, his strong arms the only thing holding me upright. "This is my fault," I whispered against his chest, my voice breaking into shards. "I killed him. I tried to save him, and I killed him." "Mary, stop," Tom said firmly, his voice rough with his own pain. "Emily killed him. You just exposed it, but at what cost?" My son was dying, hating me, alone in a hospital bed because I'd chosen public justice over private mercy. That night, I knelt beside my bed again, but this time I had no words. Prayer had abandoned me. God felt a million miles away, hidden behind clouds and judgment. I just knelt there in the darkness, my knees aching against hardwood, my heart fractured into pieces too small to gather. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Noah, my quiet grandson who'd barely spoken since the church incident. It said only, Grandma, I can save him. Come to the hospital, now. I stared at those words, my hands shaking, not understanding. How could anyone save Daniel now? His liver was destroyed. The doctors had said months ago that transplants were risky at best, impossible at worst. Tom drove me to the hospital through dawn light that looked thin and gray. Everything looked washed out, like a photograph left too long in the sun. We ran through the parking lot, my old bones protesting, my lungs burning. Noah met us outside Daniel's room. He looked terrified and determined and heartbreakingly young. "I'm a match," he said simply, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. "Blood type, tissue markers, everything. I can give him part of my liver." "No," I breathed, the word ripped from somewhere primal and maternal. "Noah, no, you're 22. You have your whole life." "He's my father," Noah interrupted, his voice breaking on the last word. "And you're right, Grandma. Family protects family, no matter the cost." He looked at me with those young, fierce eyes. "Besides, someone needs to prove that love isn't what Mom showed us. That real love requires sacrifice, real sacrifice." And there, in that hospital hallway smelling of antiseptic and despair, I understood what redemption might cost. Not just my reputation, not just my comfort, but pieces of the people I loved most, offered up on altars I'd built with my righteous fury. "Are you sure?" I whispered, touching Noah's face the way I used to when he was small. "I'm sure," he replied, covering my hand with his. "Now let's go tell Dad." Daniel's hospital room smelled like fear and failing organs, that sharp chemical scent mixed with something sweet and wrong that comes from a body eating itself alive. He lay propped against white pillows, tubes snaking from his arms, monitors beeping their mechanical rhythms. When we walked in, he turned his yellow face toward the wall, refusing to look at any of us. "Dad," Noah said softly, approaching the bed with careful steps. "I need to talk to you." "Go away," Daniel mumbled, his voice flat and lifeless. "All of you, just leave me alone to die in peace." Noah pulled a chair close and sat, ignoring his father's rejection with quiet determination. "I'm not going anywhere. And neither are you." Something in his tone made Daniel turn his head slightly. His eyes, once so sharp and intelligent, looked clouded, confused. "I'm a match, Dad," Noah continued, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands, "for a liver transplant. The doctors already ran all the tests. We can do the surgery next week." The silence stretched like taffy, thin and painful. Daniel's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came out. "No," he finally whispered, the word barely audible. "Noah, no, I won't let you." "You don't get a vote," Noah interrupted, his voice cracking with fierce love. "I'm 22, I'm an adult, and I'm giving you part of my liver whether you like it or not." Tears started sliding down Daniel's face, cutting paths through the yellow tint of his skin. "You could die," he choked out, his voice ragged with anguish and hope warring inside him. "So could you," Noah replied simply, taking his father's hand. "And I'd rather risk dying trying to save you than live knowing I did nothing." I stood frozen in the doorway, watching this exchange. Tom's arm wrapped around my waist, holding me upright. The weight of what Noah was offering, what he was willing to sacrifice, pressed down on my chest like stones. "Mom ruined everything," Daniel said, his gaze finally sliding to me. His eyes held pain so deep it had no bottom. "She destroyed what was left of my dignity, made me a spectacle, a victim for the whole town to pity." The words cut deep, precise as surgeons' scalpels. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. "She also saved your life," Noah said quietly, his voice carrying unexpected steel. "Mom was killing you, Dad. Literally poisoning you. Grandma did what she had to do." "She could have done it privately," Daniel shot back, anger flickering through his exhaustion. "Could have called the police quietly, could have protected me from humiliation." "Would you have believed it?" I asked softly, finding my voice at last. It came out rough, scraped raw from crying. If I'd told you privately, would you have believed your wife was trying to murder you? Daniel's jaw clenched. He looked away. You'd have defended her, I continued, taking a step closer to his bed. Made excuses. Convinced yourself we were crazy. She'd have cried and apologized, and you'd have forgiven her, and then she'd have finished what she started. The monitors beeped. Outside, I could hear nurses talking in low voices. Someone laughed down the hall, a sound so normal it felt obscene. The truth had to be undeniable, I said, my voice breaking despite my best efforts. It had to be public. Because Emily wasn't just hurting you, she was fooling everyone. The whole town believed in her goodness. Someone had to rip that mask off. Someone, Daniel whispered bitterly. But did it have to be you? Did it have to be my mother? The question hung in the air like smoke. I had no answer that would satisfy him. Maybe there wasn't one. Yes, I said finally, simply, because I'm the one who loves you enough to let you hate me. The surgery was scheduled for the following Thursday. 5 days of testing, preparation, consent forms signed in triplicate. 5 days of Daniel barely speaking to me. 5 days of watching Noah try to stay brave while terror leaked through the cracks of his composure. The night before, I couldn't sleep. I walked the hospital corridors at 3 in the morning, my slippers shuffling against linoleum that gleamed under fluorescent lights. I found myself in the chapel, a small room with simple wooden chairs and a cross on the wall. I knelt there, my old knees screaming in protest, and finally found words for prayer. Lord, I don't know if what I did was right or wrong anymore. I whispered into the darkness. All I know is I'd do it again. I'd do it 1,000 times if it meant saving my child. The cross stayed silent. God offered no clarity, but somewhere deep inside, I felt a small measure of peace settle into my bones. Surgery day dawned clear and cold. December sunlight streamed through hospital windows, making everything look sharp and clean. Noah changed into his hospital gown, trying to crack jokes that fell flat in the pre-op room. Hey, Grandma, he said with false brightness, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. If I don't make it, you can have my Xbox. Don't even joke, I said sharply, my voice fierce with fear and love. You're going to be fine. Both of you. Ava sat beside her brother, holding his hand so tight her knuckles had gone white. She hadn't stopped crying since we'd arrived. Susan stood at the window, her back rigid with tension, watching the parking lot like answers might drive up in cars. When they wheeled Noah away, he looked so young on that gurney, just a boy playing at being a hero. I wanted to run after him, to pull him back, to offer myself instead, but Tom held me firm. Let him do this, Tom murmured into my hair, his voice rough with unshed tears. Let him be the man he's becoming. Daniel's gurney followed minutes later. As they rolled him past, he reached out and caught my hand. His grip was weak but deliberate. Mom, he said hoarsely, his eyes meeting mine for the first time in days. If this works, if we both live, I don't know if I can forgive you. Not yet. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. I know, baby. I know. But... He paused, swallowing hard. Thank you. For loving me enough to be hated. Then they took him away, and all we could do was wait. 8 hours. 8 hours of pacing and praying and drinking bad hospital coffee. 8 hours of every terrible possibility playing out in my mind like horror films on repeat. The surgeon finally emerged at 6:17 p.m. I know because I was staring at the clock, watching seconds tick by like tiny eternities. His mask was down. His face looked tired but not devastated. They're both stable, he said, and the world started spinning again. The transplant took. It's early yet, but all signs are good. I collapsed into Tom's arms, my legs finally giving out. Around me, my family cried and laughed and held each other tight. Relief felt like drowning in reverse. Air rushing back into lungs that had forgotten how to breathe. 3 days later, I sat between their hospital beds, Daniel on my left, Noah on my right, both of them pale and stitched and alive. "You know what's funny?" Noah said suddenly, his voice still weak from anesthesia. "I gave Dad part of my liver, but Grandma, she gave us something bigger." "What's that?" Ava asked from the corner, where she'd been sketching them both, her own way of processing trauma into art. "Backbone," Noah replied simply, looking at me with those fierce young eyes. She showed us what real love looks like. Not the pretty kind Mom faked, the ugly, hard, sacrificial kind that costs everything. Daniel didn't respond, but his hand, resting on top of the blanket, moved slightly, not quite reaching toward me, but not pulling away either. And in that tiny gesture, I saw the first fragile thread of healing begin to weave itself through the wreckage. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived at the hospital. Prison postmark. Emily's handwriting small and cramped on the envelope. I held it in my hands, staring at my name written in her script, and wondered what words could possibly matter now. I didn't open Emily's letter for 3 days. It sat on our kitchen table like a small bomb, the envelope slowly gathering coffee rings and breadcrumbs from our meals. Tom would glance at it, then at me, but he never asked. He knew some decisions had to be made in silence. On the 4th day, I picked it up. The paper felt thin and cheap, prison stationery. I could see her handwriting bleeding through from the other side, desperate and cramped. My hands didn't shake anymore. That surprised me. I'd cried enough tears to fill the harbor. Now I just felt empty, scoured clean like driftwood. The letter said what they always say. "I'm sorry, I was sick, I didn't mean it. Please forgive me, I was desperate. You don't understand the pressure I was under." Daniel drove me to it. Please, please, please. Every word a lie wrapped in a bigger lie, wrapped in something that might have once resembled truth before it rotted. I read it twice. Then I folded it carefully, slipped it back into the envelope, and put it in my purse. That afternoon, I drove to the beach. December wind cut across the empty shore, sharp with salt and winter. Ava came with me, my artist granddaughter who'd live-streamed the church revelation, who'd turned private pain into public reckoning. We walked to the water's edge where waves rolled in gray and relentless. The sand was cold and packed hard under my feet. Seagulls cried overhead, their voices lonely and clean. "Do you want to read it?" I asked Ava, offering her the envelope. She looked at it for a long moment, then shook her head. Her hair whipped around her face in the wind. "No, Grandma." Some apologies don't deserve an audience. Smart girl, my brilliant broken girl. I held the letter out over the water. For a moment I thought about throwing it, letting the ocean take it, letting the tide carry Emily's words away to drown, but that felt too violent, too angry. Instead, I opened my hand and let the wind take it. The envelope lifted, dancing on the current like a white bird, tumbling and spinning before the waves reached up and pulled it under. We watched it disappear, swallowed by the Atlantic. Gone, but not forgotten. Forgiven, but not erased. "Is that it then?" Ava asked softly, her voice nearly lost in the wind. "Is it over?" "No," I said honestly, putting my arm around her shoulders. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it's different now." And it was different. 2 years have passed since that December Sunday when lightning and truth struck together. 2 years of slow healing, like watching bones knit back together after a terrible break. Painful, imperfect, but undeniably real. Daniel recovered. The liver transplant worked better than anyone dared hope. He lives in Gray Harbor now, just 3 blocks from us, in a small cottage overlooking the water. Some days, he walks the pier at dawn, moving slowly, but moving. Color has crept back into his face. His eyes, though still carrying shadows, have lost that yellow tint of death deferred. We have breakfast together most Sundays. He doesn't hug me yet, but he sits at my table. He eats my cooking. He talks about the weather and his new job at the credit union and Noah's graduation coming up. Small talk, surface talk, but underneath runs the deep current of something being rebuilt. Last month he brought me flowers, just showed up on my porch holding grocery store carnations, cheap and bright. He didn't say why, just handed them over with an awkward shrug. "Mom told me you like these," he said quietly, then caught himself. "I mean, Emily used to say—" He stopped, his jaw clenching. "I do like them," I said gently, taking the bouquet. "Thank you, baby." He nodded and left quickly, but I saw his eyes shine with tears he wasn't ready to shed yet. That's forgiveness, I think. Not the dramatic kind where everyone cries and hugs and declares themselves healed, but the slow kind. The kind that shows up with cheap flowers and can't quite find the words but is trying anyway. The town eventually came around too, though it took time. At first, people crossed the street to avoid me, whispered when I entered stores. Martha Henderson wrote a letter to the newspaper calling me a disgrace to Christian values. But then Emily's trial happened. All the evidence laid out in legal proceedings, the poisoned medications, the forged insurance documents, the affair with Victor Holland, who got 15 years for conspiracy to commit fraud and attempted murder. The jury convicted Emily in less than 3 hours, 25 years without parole. After that, the whispers changed. People started nodding at me in church again, bringing casseroles, asking quietly how Daniel was doing. Last Sunday, Martha Henderson sat next to me during service. Didn't say a word, just sat there with her hymnal open, singing Amazing Grace in her warbling soprano. When we reached the verse about being blind but now we see, she looked at me and nodded once. Just once. Sometimes that's all the apology you get. I'll take it. Noah graduated with honors in computer science. He works remotely now, living in Daniel's old room at our house while he saves money. His scar runs across his abdomen like a badge of honor. Sometimes I catch him touching it absently, remembering. "Does it hurt?" I asked him once. "Only when I forget what it means," he replied, his eyes meeting mine with understanding beyond his years. Then I remember. I gave life to someone who gave life to me. That's what family does. Ava graduated art school and had her first gallery show in Raleigh. She called the exhibition Unveiled, paintings exploring truth, justice, and the cost of both. The centerpiece was a massive canvas of an old woman standing in a church while lightning split the sky behind her. She titled it, "My Grandmother." I cried when I saw it, not from pain this time, from something else. Something like pride mixed with wonder that all of this broken, terrible, beautiful thing had somehow produced grace. Susan got promoted. Tom's arthritis got worse, but his spirit stayed strong. We walk the beach most evenings now, holding hands like teenagers, watching the sunset paint the water gold and pink. This morning I woke before dawn. The house was quiet except for Tom's soft snoring and the distant sound of waves. I made coffee and sat on the porch wrapped in the quilt my mother made, watching Gray Harbor wake up. The ocean was calm, glass smooth and reflecting the pale sky. Gulls drifted lazy overhead. Somewhere down the street, someone's dog barked a greeting to the day, and I thought, this is what redemption looks like. Not perfection, not forgetting, just the quiet knowledge that we survived the storm and found each other again on the other side. Daniel called an hour later. "Mom," he said, and there was something different in his voice. Lighter. I was thinking, maybe we could have everyone over for dinner this weekend. You and Dad, Susan, the kids. Maybe I could actually cook for once. My throat closed up. I had to swallow 3 times before I could answer. "I'd like that very much, baby." "Good," he said, and I heard him smile through the phone. "Because I want to try making your pot roast recipe. The one with the carrots. I'll text you the instructions," I managed to say past the lump in my throat. After we hung up, I sat holding my phone, staring at the water. Tom came out and handed me a fresh cup of coffee, steam rising into the cool air. "You okay?" he asked, settling into the chair beside me. "Yeah," I said, and meant it. On good days, we share laughter. On bad days, we hold each other closer. That's what family truly means. He squeezed my hand, his grip still strong despite the years. We sat there together, watching the harbor wake up, counting our blessings in the space between heartbeats. The truth did set us free. But freedom, I've learned, isn't the absence of pain. It's the courage to face pain and choose love anyway, even when love costs everything, especially then, because that's when it matters most.